after 11 is the time. You're listening to James O'Brien on LBC, where I've got to do this, actually. If I don't do it on a Wednesday, I won't do it at all in the week, because I feel my energy levels diminishing as the week passes. My bright eyes and bushy tails on a Monday morning by Friday are somewhat shop-soiled. So we're going in, lads. We're going in. We're going Brexit. Well, here's the thing. Two things you might find interesting if you listen to the programme on a regular basis. The first is this. Even I have to gird my loins to dive back into this topic, into this territory. It's so bizarre. So God knows how people who actually thought it was going to be a good thing are feeling. No wonder my inbox is full daily with people screaming at me to stop talking about it. It's over, move on. It's as if you thought you'd won the cup, and then, I don't know, VAR kicked in or something like that, and it turns out that you've suffered an incredible, crushing defeat, and you want everyone to stop talking about it now, but you won't give the cup back. We won, get over it. What did you win? Yeah. All right. I can't even do fish anymore. God, I hate James O'Brien. I can't even pretend that fish has gone better. Anyway, at least I suppose a blue passport's still there, is it? The farmers are complaining, hauliers are complaining, caterers are complaining, hoteliers are complaining, restaurateurs are complaining, employers are complaining, exporters are complaining, importers are complaining, Northern Ireland is complaining. Who's not complaining? I honestly don't know. And perhaps that's why I feel lethargy's not the right word, but I feel a lack of vim and vigour when I find myself turning to the latest evidence of the lies that they've told coming home to roost. We now live in a country where the government is complaining about the treaty upon the back of which they got elected. Right? I don't think you can dispute that. I always would love you to try. 0345 6060 973. But just try this on for size, right? The get Brexit done, the oven-ready deal, or however you want to break it down. The thing what was signed, the thing that kicked in on January the 1st of this year, yeah? Which, I have to warn you, still hasn't kicked in properly. There's a whole heap of stuff that was deferred and delayed that's going to kick in before close of play this year. Next month being end of this month, I think, being particularly interesting. But leave the detail there for now and have a think instead about this, right? It's an 80-seat majority. They're largely unassailable. Actually, that's not true. They are assailable. They would lose a vote on foreign aid. So in the classic tradition of Boris Johnson's government, they're not going to have one. Yay, go democracy. So you have a government that told you to vote for them to get Brexit done. And for a whole heap of reasons that historians will be picking over for generations to come, you were still under the illusion that getting Brexit done would be good for the UK. And there's no shame in that. Again, you look at the effort and the energy that was put into misleading you, and you'd have to be a very unkind person to think that anybody who got misled was culpable. I know some of you do. Some of you are very unhappy with the contempt for the con and compassion for the con mantra. And maybe if my life had been more detrimentally and directly affected by Brexit, then I would probably perhaps share some of your points, but I don't. And that, to me, is key. They got elected on the back of a treaty that they're now, within 6 months, not only complaining about, but attacking the other signatories of the treaty for wanting to abide by the terms of the treaty. We'll have a look at that in a moment. But it's of a piece, isn't it, with this government? And, of course, Michael Gove remains a senior member of this government. It's to him that I turn your attention next, because Jolyon Morm of the Good Law Project is on the line to talk us through the significance, and I suppose to begin with, the verdict that has been handed down this morning.
Hi, James. This is the second of two judicial reviews Good Law Project's brought where we've had decisions from the High Court. The first of those judicial reviews found that Matt Hancock acted unlawfully in failing to publish contracts for PPE and other sort of no competition contracts. This morning, we got the result of Good Law Project's second judicial review, and the High Court has found that Michael Gove acted unlawfully as well. And he acted unlawfully because he awarded contracts to associates of his and Dominic Cummings And what the High Court says is that a sort of reasonable independent observer would think that there was a reasonable risk that those contracts went to those associates of Cummings and Gove, Public First, because they were friends or associates of Michael Gove. The way in which the law puts it is apparent bias. The way in which you and I would put it is it looks like favouritism.
Well, I'd probably go further, actually, Jolyon, but then I'm not bound by the legal decorum in which you are so well versed that the word I'm thinking of begins with C, but it's categorically not that one. How much money are we talking about here?
Well, this was £560,000, so a large amount of money for work of this nature, not the hundreds of millions of pounds that we are dealing with in some of our PPE procurement cases, but it absolutely vindicates the line that Good Law Project has been pushing for a year now, about there being institutionalised cronyism. In other words, that was the C word.
That was the C word I was looking for, just for the avoidance of doubt.
Not the other looking for. Perhaps for the same reason as you don't want to use the other C word, I won't use the other C word either.
Yes.
But watch this space on the other C word, I would say.
Well, on it goes, and I mean £560,000 in this case, which. Obviously, you could do up 3 or 4 flats with that sort of money, couldn't you? If you were employing the right interior decorators, and the offence is. But I don't know whether you share this frustration, because you get the results, but they don't resonate in the way that perhaps we would expect them to, and in a way that we perhaps both believe they would have done in a slightly different era, perhaps a less Brexity era. There's a Brexit connection to this case, of course, I think.
Well, Public First were used by Michael Gove and Dominic Cummings to do quite a lot of the work around the referendum. Good Law Project has a sort of copycat case, really, against a comms agency called Hanbury. And the fact pattern in Hanbury, I think, is worse than the fact pattern in Public First. Very, very difficult to see how government can win Hanbury, having lost Public First. That would be 3 in a row. The amount of money in Hanbury is bigger. But Hanbury was also another agency that was absolutely at the heart of the referendum. And you look at these links, you look at the ways in which these contracts were awarded, you look at the relationships between those supposedly acting properly as regards public money and those getting that public money, and you think this is really, really bad. And you're absolutely right, James, I think, to say that, in years gone by, if a minister ever was caught in the way in which we've now caught Hancock and Gove, there would have been resignations, and if there hadn't been resignations, there would have been sackings. But these ministers are shameless. This government is shameless. It's really troubling. We have a case where I think the Serious Fraud Office should be involved. We're going to refer that case to the Serious Fraud Office. And the difficulty that I have is I don't believe that the Serious Fraud Office is going to get involved. I don't have any faith in any of the institutions anymore to look at fraud. I mean, even internal government agencies are saying there is a very high risk of fraud around PPE procurement. We've got very good evidence, we think, prima facie evidence of wrongdoing, and I'm sort of, it's jaw dropping to say this, but I just can't have confidence that our criminal authorities will take the look that they should take.
Which is a very different complaint to the public not caring. Now, you can see why the public don't care, but the your fears regarding institutional concern about these kind of conducts is a very different thing, and not subject to it's my team, therefore they can do no wrong. I just, to play the devil's advocate, but sincerely, the defence would be, one presumes, something along the lines of, It was an emergency. It was a global pandemic. We didn't have time to go through the normal channels. And also, and many people listening may have some sympathy for this, if I meet someone or know someone who can provide the service that I need, particularly against the backdrop of it being an urgent emergency situation, then why shouldn't I go with the people I know, rather than wait a fortnight to put it through all the correct processes and tenders and sum up other applicants? It's perfectly natural to go with the people I know, the people that I went to school with or the people that I used to work with.
Well, all of those arguments were run by government in this case.
Yes.
And what the High Court said was, well, actually, you had a number of agencies who were in place who were doing work with government. Public First had to be briefed about the job in exactly the same way as those other agencies already working on the ground would have needed to have been briefed on the job. And the decision to give the contract to Public First was a function of the choices made by Michael Gove and Dominic Cummings about who to use. So, that argument has been put, and the High Court just says, well, on the facts, it's just not right.
Yes. And that's perhaps why some members of this government have such a problem with judges and lawyers and indeed laws, John.
Well, it's striking to me that here we are, we're exposing cronyism with 2 judicial review cases. Both of those judicial review cases have been crowdfunded. And what the government is responding with is not, oh, my God, this is really dreadful. We made terrible mistakes during the course of the pandemic. This unlawful conduct does not do trust in government any service. It does not accord with how we think government should behave. Yeah. They don't do that. What they do instead is they launch a targeted attack on me personally, a targeted and I think deceitful attack on me personally in the Mail on Sunday. They threaten to narrow or close down crowdfunding. They threaten to narrow or close down judicial review. This is not the way in which a reasonable government behaves. This is an unlawful use of public money, and not the first.
And not the last, in conclusion.
And not the last. We have a string of about 12 or so further judicial reviews of government procurement where we're still waiting for the decision. And we are alarmed at the sums of public money that government is going to spend defending the indefensible. After we won our judicial review against Matt Hancock, we wrote to him and we said, Secretary of State, it really does no good for public money to be wasted on lawyers whilst you try to stave off the political embarrassment that comes with you being found to be breaking or have broken the law.
Have you got a ballpark figure? How much do you think they would have spent on these 2 cases in total, ballpark?
On these 2 cases, well, we know their costs for this case were more than £500,000.
Taxpayers Alliance are going to be furious, Jolyon.
Taxpayers Alliance, I can only imagine what Taxpayers Alliance are thinking, absolutely.
Spitting nails.
And what they're thinking, how on earth?
What's this mole fella doing, nicking all our act? It's outrageous behaviour. We're the ones that, Anyway, I digress slightly. Tell people how they can find out more about the... Sorry, carry on.
They're going to waste millions and millions of public money defending the indefensible. Really, they should put their hands up. They should do the sensible thing. Admit they behaved unlawfully. There should be resignations where appropriate. We don't want to continue to fight these cases. We want just to see good governance. We want to see proper use of public money. That's what this is about.
And people who would like to find out more or indeed offer support to the work that you do, what can they do? How can they find out more?
Well, we have a full description of the judgment. We have a link to the judgment. We have a full description of the work that we do at our website, which is goodlawproject.org. Very grateful to you, Jamie.
Always grateful to you, Jolyon, for your insights and input. Jolyon Morm there, reporting on the latest humiliation for the government. Well, I say humiliation. It's a verdict that has found Michael Gove to have behaved unlawfully in the doling out of £560,000 worth of what right-wing journalists usually call our money. Yeah, that's what you do, is it? Have I got that right? I need to check the playbook. It's our money that they're giving to their cronies. Yeah, and Diane Abbott drank a mojito on a train that time. I can't do every single show, can I, for the rest of my career, saying, why don't you care about this really important stuff? Having just spent the first hour of today's programme, why do you care about this really unimportant stuff? 20 past 11. 22 minutes after 11. I'm very cross today. About to go... There's only 2 calls waiting to talk to me because I haven't actually set up a topic yet this hour. One was called Vince and the other was called Vance. I just wanted to get them on, but I didn't have the comedy nature of their juxtaposed names. But Vince has gone AWOL, and Vance, I'm not talking yet about the morality or the legality of this government. We may get onto it later, or indeed tomorrow. When we were seeking to understand why the collision of Brexit with the Good Friday Agreement would be so difficult for the island of Ireland and the north of Ireland in particular, we did something remarkably bold, I think, and I am patting myself on the back, but only for the quality of listeners that I have, not for anything I do. We confined the conversation to people in Northern Ireland. Or, actually, I think, to be fairer, people on the island of Ireland. There are a couple of times, you forget, don't you, pre-COVID, but there were a couple of times when we really rolled the dice on the switchboard, asking... This worked during coronavirus as well. What's going on in other countries, and having every line into the building occupied by somebody listening to the programme in another country. It was quite incredible, given that when I started here, there were days when you couldn't get the phone to ring for love nor money, and when it did, it was almost always a taxi driver. I've got nothing against taxi drivers. But, variety is the spice of life. And the COVID call-ins came as a consequence of the Brexit call-ins, when somewhat... optimistically, I'd say, just give me a ring if you are in Ireland, and give those of us who aren't a slightly better insight into what is going to happen, what is happening, what is likely to happen. And that is why one call in particular always sticks in my mind, from a fellow who'd had some building work done since the Good Friday Agreement was signed, and found himself living in a home where I think his bathroom was in Northern Ireland, while the rest of his house was in the Republic. Such is the nature of an invisible border, as it were. And when he sought to explain how regulatory alignment, which I don't know is a phrase that appears in the Good Friday Agreement, but it's a fundamental principle of it. You get rid of a border by having the territories on both sides of the border agreeing to abide by exactly the same rules and regulations. See... I hope you don't think I'm being condescending, but these are the moments where I really do wonder how anyone could have failed still to understand this, let alone the Secretary of State for Northern Ireland. I'm thinking more of ordinary punters. If you want to get rid of a difficult, controversial, bloody border, then the only way you can really do it, the only way you can stop that border being necessary, important or dangerous, is by having exactly the same rules, regulations and laws on both sides. So I was speaking to someone yesterday who grew up in a border town in the north, and was describing the sense for many years post Good Friday Agreement of having your cake and eating it. You'd have both euros and pounds in your pocket. You'd know exactly, just in your mind, what the exchange rate was. If you went a mile up the road that way, you might be able to buy something for slightly less money because of the exchange rate than you'd be paying if you bought it a mile down the road in the other direction. And it was just so baked in. I know there were people in Northern Ireland that voted to leave, and I know that some political parties in Northern Ireland are so committed to the union with the rest of the United Kingdom that they possibly, what would be a kind way of putting it? They just didn't think about anything else, such as their passionate commitment to that union. Everything else is detail, gravy, fact, doesn't matter, my feeling. Absolutely, and we all do that. It's very easy to talk about feelings and facts, and I do myself sometimes. Point out how sad it is when we allow our feelings to trump our facts. But we all do it. No one gets a free pass on that. If you've got feelings, then there will be occasions when you've prioritised them over facts. You know? You didn't get married to the person who, according to an algorithm of suitability, was most likely to make you an excellent husband or wife. You got married to the person who floated your boat the most. That's a feeling. That's not a fact. Well, it's a fact and a feeling. I probably shouldn't have gone down this marriage allegory at this point in proceedings, but let me steer you back onto the relatively straight and narrow. The sausage story is, at first glance, a little bit silly. At second glance, it's completely inevitable. Here is the deal, right? the Northern Ireland Territory, because it has to abide by the same rules and regulations as the Republic of Ireland in order to render that border meaningless and invisible and removable and indeed removed, okay, remains in the single market stroke customs union to all intents and purposes. We signed up for this, right? We came up with this plan. We took it to the European Union and they said, yeah, all right, but, you know, you're going to have to do X, Y and Z. And we said, yeah, okay, we'll do X, Y and Z. And then they signed it. They ratified it. They signed it and they passed it in the House of Commons. And now the British government is saying, yeah, I know we signed it and I know what it says, but we didn't mean it. This is, I don't think, an exaggeration. This is why I can feel my juices beginning to flow again now. But generally speaking, I find the Brexit conversations actually oddly, given that in many ways I owe my current career high to Brexit analysis. This is still my country that's been put through the mincer, so there's no joy in it, and I would now rather look away. I'd love to move on. But the lies are still in charge, the lies are still harming us, and the reality is still not fully arrived on platform 2. So in order to import into the single market, you have to abide by the rules of the single market, which are set by the European Union. Right? We signed up to that. And now we are, as a nation, possibly, as a government, certainly, as a Prime Minister, indubitably, we are now saying, yeah, but we didn't really mean it. When we said that, obviously, we understood we needed to do X, Y and Z in order to achieve A, B and C. We didn't really mean it. We thought we'd get A, B and C without doing X, Y and Z. And I find it increasingly hard not to conclude that that is the closest thing they've got to a plan. Look, we won the election by promising to get it, quotes, done, which was achievable as long as nobody actually asked what it was. Brexit means Brexit. Oh, actually, you know, in some ways I have missed this. So it's almost like little Pavlov reactions tripping in the back of my brain as the old catchphrases come back to the fore. Brexit means nothing. You know that now, right? 17.4 million people voted for it. Voted for what? Voted for 17.4 million different things. And now these chickens are coming home to roost. Chlorinated chickens coming home to roost, perhaps. So this is the bit that I struggle with. It's a bit like saying, look, here's a tree, and inviting calls from people to say, that's not a tree, mate, that's an elephant. Because it's all so obvious, it's so ploddingly predictable that I still don't understand dissent. Yeah, even J-Dog trying to tutor me on what was going to happen in Northern Ireland in one of those infernal viral interviews, clips. Completely and utterly wrong. That clip I played you a moment ago, Michael Gove talking specifically about sausages, now proved within 6 months completely and categorically wrong. So either they were lying through their teeth, either they were expecting some mythical unicorn to turn up and save them at the last minute, or they were planning all along to mislead you, to mislead the European Union, and then to somehow hope that at the end of the process they'd be able to get what it was that they wanted without doing all of the things that they said they'd do to get what it was that they wanted. Are you still with me at the back? Right, it's PMQs in half an hour, so I'm going to open up the phone lines now. If you are in Ireland, call me. All right? I mean, I'd like you to talk about the subject that we're covering. I don't just want to have a catch-up or do it just for the crack. But how's it all looking from over there? 0345 60 60973 as the impact of this protocol begins to become impossible or ever harder to deny. What's going on? 0345 60 60973. It's 11:31. Holly Harris has your headlines. So, again, it's like that radio programme of yore, where it's now been proved beyond all doubt that the emperor is naked, but still there are people insisting that he's wearing clothes. So July the 1st is the date upon which the deferment of the Northern Ireland Protocol ends and the rules regarding importing into Northern Ireland change. You need to have an agreement between Great Britain and the European Union. This is under the terms of the Northern Ireland Protocol. You will not be able to import, among other things, but for the purposes of today's conversation, processed meats into Northern Ireland from Great Britain if they haven't come to an agreement on regulatory standards. Now, the Good Friday Agreement determines that those regulatory standards have to be the same as the ones in Ireland, and the ones in Ireland are the same as the ones in the whole of the European Union. Our government is saying the whole point of Brexit was to make up our own regulatory standards, so we can't possibly agree to abide by yours, to which the European Union responds by saying, well, if you don't abide by the same regulatory standards as the island of Ireland, and indeed the rest of the single markets, there's two horses running here, there's the Irish horse and there's the European horse, then you can't bring them in. And you know, the bits where I begin to lose the thread a little, because nobody's perfect, involve the potential introduction of tariffs and the sort of immovability of these two positions. So, again, I find myself wondering how anyone can still not understand this. And then you realise Michael Gove told you the polar opposite of the truth back in December of last year. We'll go to Alan first in Northern Ireland. Before that, this is Michael Gove telling you straight, the interview on Sky, I think, with Sam Coates. I've got a lot of time for a cracking interview, but I don't think you hear his questions on this, but he got to the heart of the matter. This is Michael Gove looking you in the eye and telling you that what is happening today could never happen because they'd already dealt with it in the treaty. Just have a listen and tell me I'm not going mad.
From January the 1st, it will be the case that supermarkets and others will make sure that British bangers can be on plates in Belfast and in Ballymena. Of course, there are some EU rules that govern chilled meats, which we understand. But we were very clear in these talks that Northern Ireland is part of the United Kingdom. We need to make sure that the sausages that our supermarket chains provide to citizens in Northern Ireland can continue to flow. We've secured that agreement with the Commission, and that means that some of the disruption which people feared might occur after the end of the transition period won't occur. When it comes to making sure that sausages can move across the Irish Sea, that this is a win for the people of Northern Ireland, a win for our supermarkets, but above all, it's a win for Maroš Šefčovič.
Yada, yada, yada. So I suppose there's one defence here that insulates him from the accusation of lying, is that he was only talking about the 6-month deferment period. He was only talking about... So there'll be no threat to the importation of sausages until the end of June. He just didn't add the second bit of that sentence. He said there'll be no threat at all. Sausages will continue to flow freely until the end of June. That's the bit they didn't say out loud. Now we're at the end of June, and they're not going to flow. So I guess technically you could mount a defence, albeit you're defending the man who's being found in court this morning to have acted unlawfully in the award of a contract to a couple of cronies who worked for him on vote leave. Whew. Oh, boy. So, how's it hanging in Northern Ireland? How's it landing? Don't pay enough attention to that part of of this country, but we're trying to make amends. Alan's in Newcastle, not that one, the other one. What would you like to say, Alan?
Hi, James. I work in most of the time in Europe. I'm currently in Sweden, but I do live in Newcastle. I live in Newcastle, County Down. Originally from Scotland, but You're one of those citizens of nowhere that Theresa May warned us about, aren't you? That's correct. Yeah. But I'm sort of not going to talk about what you're talking about with Gove and what have you. But I'm just my own selfish story about Brexit and my introduction on January the 16th, when I, having worked in Europe for 5 years now and really successfully created a nice small business for myself. And then January 16th, flying out to Sweden, and was stopped at border control. They said, you don't have the right papers, so I was swiftly deported on the very next flight back to Dublin, because that's where I fly out of every time. Yeah. And, the border police, I said, well, what papers do I need? And the Swedish border police were not aware of what papers either. You know, and you couldn't blame them. They were just carrying out their duties. But it was like, get ready for Brexit. Well, 2 weeks after January the 1st, certainly the UK wasn't ready for Brexit. It still isn't ready for Brexit. And it was an altogether horrible experience getting deported.
That sounds like something of an understatement.
I got to spend the night on Stockholm Arlanda floor.
Really?
And it was like something Tom Hanks did in The Terminal. I pulled a bench into a quiet area to try and sleep, and then was woken the next morning by workmen saying you have to move because we're painting in here. I promise you, it was a horrendous experience.
I don't think this is selfish. I think this is absolutely fascinating. And this was because you didn't have the correct visa.
I didn't have the correct papers, but
but no one knew what they were.
And I'm still in the process of trying to get the right papers, which I'm still not convinced I'm ever going to get. And my business is just, sailing down the Swanee here. The laughable experience about this was obviously because of COVID. I had to have a negative PCR test to fly to Stockholm. I then landed in Stockholm, and I think I had a 72-hour window for this negative PCR test. Then when I was getting deported, the next flight back, which was maybe 20 hours later, you don't have your PCR test is now non-valid. And they basically said, well, this will be Ireland's problem, so we're just going to stick you on the plane. There was about 6 people on the plane, and because I was getting deported, I was forced to sit on the very back row beside the toilet.
Laughing with you. I'm not laughing at you. I'm laughing with you. I know.
And then
you weren't in handcuffs, though, were you? You weren't handcuffed.
I wasn't. But they put it this way: they took my passport and only returned it when they marched me onto the plane. But I'm landing in Dublin. I'm then at the border control, and they're saying, "Right, can you have your PCR test?" I said, "I don't have one. It's out of date." They said, "How did you get on the plane?" I said, "Well, I've been deported." So they said, "Oh, you're going to have to go to the guards, as in the police in Ireland." The guards then say, "Oh, we're going to have to caution you for not having a correct valid PCR test." And eventually someone actually saw some sense and said, "How are you getting to Northern Ireland?" I said, "Well, my wife's picking me up directly outside the airport here." And she says, "And you're just going to go straight home?" I said, "Yes." Oh, she says, "On you go." So that was my...
I mean, there is some territory here that could be filed under teething trouble, and there is some territory here that could be filed under COVID-related rather than Brexit-related. But this sort of bedrock of confusion seems like a constant, doesn't it? That nobody...
It's just a constant. And I don't know who has benefited from this horrendous thing that we've been forced to go into.
Well, there's a phone-in to happen there. I don't know if it's going to happen today. I've got PMQs on the horizon, but I'd love to hear from people who are celebrating still.
It really is it's so distressing, from everyone in Northern Ireland, what's happening. I mean, one of the silliest ones I heard recently was my son, who lives in Scotland, coming across on the ferry and was going to bring his dog. Now, you used to be able to bring dogs back and forth, no problem. Well, he's now getting charged £150 to bring the dog, and he also has to get a rabies test for the dog. So that's another £60.
All of this is to come. I mean, this is the camouflage of COVID, actually, because we haven't been travelling much and we haven't been doing our normal... you have, and look what happened to you. You ended up getting deported. Blimey, that's a punchline that I wasn't expecting to hear in the course of a conversation that began with a reflection upon the status of sausages and freedom of movement. Freedom of movement of sausages. What about freedom of movement of Alan? Poor fellow got deported from Sweden. Alan, thank you. And that is, as he said himself, a slightly tangential observation, although it speaks to the central truth of chaos and confusion. Steve in Whitstable says, James, did we sell sausages to the EU before? If so, what's changed? Steve, I'm not going to ask how you voted back in 2016, but that is a question that chills me to my vote. What's changed is that we're no longer in the single market. And therefore, if we don't agree to abide by their rules and therefore rejoin the single market, which we can't do because one of the key rules is freedom of movement of goods and people and money, we're no longer in it. That's what's changed. So it's a bit like, I can't find an analogy here. You know what I'm like with my analogies. What's changed is, I'll tell you what's changed, is that you used to have a pitch at the car boot sale, right? And now you don't. But you've turned up with a bag full of football shirts and you're trying to flog them in the middle of the market. And the people who run the car boot sale have said, no, you can't do that. Not only have you not paid for a pitch, but you actually signed this contract promising that you wouldn't sell your T-shirts at the car boot sale unless you paid for a pitch. And you haven't paid for a pitch. So you're not coming in. That's what's changed, Steve. But the fact that people, and no offence to you, mate, I'm sure you've got more important things to worry about, but the fact that people don't know that is exactly the problem that we're discussing at the moment. How has it come to this? Michael Gove swearing, looking you straight in the eye, telling you that what's happening now would never happen. With that possible defence that he was only talking about the first 6 months of 2021, he just forgot to add that. I think that's an unlikely defence and not one that I would believe, but I think it's technically credible. Incredible, isn't it? Absolutely incredible. 11:45 is the time. Hit the numbers now, you will get through. If you're in Northern Ireland, could you give me an idiot's guide to what you think is going on and what you think is going to happen, particularly if it involves correcting any of the sort of sweeping generalisations or observations that I've already indulged in? 0345 6060 973. 3 is the number you need. It's 11:45. It's 10 to 12. I ask you to ring in and provide me with an idiot's guide to what's happening on the ground in Belfast, and no lesser luminary than the executive editor of the Belfast Telegraph takes up the invitation. John Laverty is on the line from Belfast. John, over to you. I'll be the idiot, you be the guide.
I think I was trying to do the idiot bit, but I'm actually, funny enough, I live in Belfast and I'm actually from Ballymena, both of which were named by Mr. Gould.
There you go. He was speaking directly to you, wasn't he? That was the thing.
Yeah. So I felt it was all about me. An Idiot's Guide to Northern Ireland. James, many times in your show, I'm a big fan of your show, and many times in your show you have made this point that the Brexit argument is over. You know, it's done. Yes. Well, with regard to that in Northern Ireland, microcosmically, the protocol argument is also over. I mean, with Brexit came the protocol.
Yes.
And Brexit was brought about, as you well know, by the machinations of the DUP over here. Mm. But now, of course, the DUP want to be the champions of, you know, anti-protocol, anti-Brexit, even though they're the ones who brought it in the first place. But as anyone with any regard for Ireland would know, and Northern Ireland especially, everything has to be binary over here. So when you have the DUP wanting rid of the protocol, they have to have somebody to argue with and somebody to fight over.
Yes.
But the problem is, the other side, if you like, the nationalists, they didn't want Brexit in the first place.
It's incredible, isn't it? Crikey. Think of it like that.
They voted against it. So you had a situation a couple of months ago where you had, I think it was 68 police officers injured on the streets of Northern Ireland with this violence about the protocol. But one of the main things was frustration. Who do you attack? If the loyalists attack the nationalists, none of them wanted the protocol.
It's actually surreal when you put it like this. So let me try and distill it into a pithy one-liner. The people who wanted this thing are now insisting that the people who didn't want this thing help them undo the damage done by the thing that they wanted. Yes,
that is correct. And obviously, as you know, the DUP have revamped in the last couple of weeks. They've got a new leader. There's a big schism down the party at the minute. They've gone very much back to the extreme right to help try and get rid of this protocol.
Which is I mean, again, an idiot's guide, it's the prioritisation of the union over everything else, every sort of observable or meaningful policy or position. So what are they, and this might be asking you to read the tea leaves, John, what are they hoping is going to happen? What from there, would they even be able to tell you what success looks like? Is it, well, I know we signed up and said that we'd do this, but we didn't expect them to actually make us do it, and therefore success for them, not just the DUP, in a sense for the British government as well, would look like the EU agreeing to let us off the things we committed to doing in the treaty that kicked in only 6 months ago.
Yes, James, that is exactly correct. But just to add to the confusion, you know, obviously the new leader of the DUP is Edwin Poots, who is not taking up a role as the First Minister. He is staying as Agriculture Minister. Now, the Agriculture Minister is responsible for bringing in the protocol, for bringing in the actual structures of the protocol and for the infrastructure of the protocol. So the man who is determined to destroy the protocol is also responsible for putting it together. I mean, if you didn't laugh, you would cry, honestly.
Well, yeah. And do you see any light at the end of the tunnel, or do you just see more mess and confusion? Well, mayhem and possibly worse, of course, because the security issue is the one area where the laughing immediately stops.
Well, of course, the laughing has to stop, but as I said earlier, who are you going to fight against when both sides, if you like, are on the same side when it comes to, you know, not wanting the outworkings of Brexit? I mean, it would be easy to be depressed about all this, but I think it's a case of lessening the effects of the protocol rather than stopping the protocol. I think that's when you take away all the bluster and the rhetoric, that's really all you.
And that's in everybody. That is in everybody's interests. Albeit there are some reports. The Telegraph's quite strong today on European Union member countries being very worried about being treated like mugs by the UK. So that sort of strengthens the resolve of the Commission negotiators. But what if, in a sentence or two, John, For the completely uninitiated, why is there such strong opposition to checks on goods coming into Northern Ireland?
Because it represents an economic border between Northern Ireland and GB.
Yeah.
And the symbolism of that is just impossible for some people to take.
It is chiefly symbolism, then. I mean, it is the sense that if you're checking...
It is almost 100% symbolism.
That's the point,
It is almost 100%.
Because if you're checking that border, and we're not checking at that border, then we feel, and we are symbolically, more Irish than British.
Correct. Yes, I mean it is all symbolism. If you look beyond all the rhetoric, you could and in fact the DUP started this with Arlene Foster when they actually said that there was benefits in having a foot in both camps, but she quickly ran away from that idea very quickly. But of course now she's toast.
Well, I'm sure we'll talk again. Well, I hope we'll talk again, John. I've got a sneaky suspicion this story isn't going anywhere soon. But thanks.
No, I'm glad we'll all still be here.
We will. I'm glad you were listening today. Thanks ever so much for ringing in. 11:56 is the time. John Laverty there, the executive editor of the Belfast Telegraph. It means I'm going to have to squeeze Mark in Belfast into a much smaller portion than I would have liked, because Theo is here to set up PMQs. Mark, I could give you about a minute and a half, mate. What do you want to say?
That's all right. Mr. Laverty seems to have been very, very accurate in most of his description of what's going on. The only thing I would say is, why do the politicians here not spend as much effort on the positives of what we might have rather than the negatives? We here can be dual citizens. Yeah. We have got so many opportunities if we look forward and using the protocols to our advantage. The negative, and we can make sausages in Northern Ireland. There's not a big problem getting chilled products made in Northern Ireland. We're a very good agricultural base. I'm on a pub. I went to order wine yesterday, a new wine list, and the first 9 wines I wanted weren't available.
The phone line's going down, and this is a result of transportation problems and
COVID, Brexit,
the first 9 wines.
Simply because it's been a bit of a perfect.
But John answered your question, didn't he? Because you're being pragmatic and fact-based and evidential. Yeah. You're saying that, look, this would be good and we could benefit from that. And in many ways, Northern Ireland does have its cake and eat it, because it remains part of the... Well, not that there is much UK cake, but if there was, you'd have a fat slice of it, but you've still got your EU cake as well.
But what I was trying to say, sorry, was that the 9 wines I couldn't get initially, I got 9 other wines. It's not as if we can't work around the situation, and by working around the situation,
change your suppliers, change what you're getting. But that was the point.
Ask the same suppliers to give us something not from France but from Chile. Yes, it was as simple as that: a Sauvignon Blanc from Chile or a Sauvignon Blanc from France. Well, at the minute, we're going to have to go to Chile, and but sure, that's just okay.
I'm just going to crack the phone line. And could answer the point you were making or the question you were making. I guess the reason why the politicians won't focus on the potential or possible benefits is because of the symbolism of that border and those checks, but I mean, you know that. Oh, happy days. What do you think, Keith? Can we get back into the Brexit groove, do you think? Should we? I mean, I quite enjoy the Theo's here as well.
But of course, the DUP had a chance in the spring of 2019 to have voted for Theresa May's deal.
They did, but that would have put the backstop in place, wouldn't it?
But that was UK-wide.
I know it was. That's what Boris Johnson resigned over.
There's no border. It's all we're all locked into. In lockstep with the customs.
But that would have been, what did they call it, the weirdos? Brino, Brexit in name only.
Yes.
Yes.
But it was an alternative, and the DUP wouldn't support it, and because the DUP didn't support it, the hardline Conservatives wouldn't support it, although there's an argument to say they wouldn't support it in their own right. And of course, Theresa May lost 3 meaningful votes. And so then we ended up with, when she went for a 4th meaningful vote, she ended up losing her job and Boris Johnson became Prime Minister.
Who had resigned.
Went back to the original plan of a backstop. Northern Ireland Protocol.
You're so condescending. I can't believe you're explaining things to people simply and clearly that they refuse to believe or understand.